Welcome to my YouTube channel Wise Whispers, where silence speaks. Mark Sullivan, 64 years old, had always believed that trust was the strongest currency in a family. Stronger than money, stronger than promises, stronger even than love. That belief shattered the morning he opened a letter that carried a number so large it didn't feel real. $700,000 envelope trembled in his hand as he stood in his quiet kitchen. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting warm lines across the wooden table, yet nothing about that moment felt warm. Final notice, the letter read. Mark blinked. His name was printed clearly at the top, his address, his signature, but he had never signed anything like this. The beginning of the betrayal. Mark had spent most of his life working as a civil engineer. He wasn't rich, but he had lived wisely. He paid off his modest home, saved enough for retirement, and kept a small emergency fund. After his wife Alina passed away 5 years ago, his world became quieter, but he found comfort in routine and in his only daughter, Lily. Lily was 32, ambitious and always dreaming big. Mark admired her spirit, even when it made him uneasy. "Dad, one day I'm going to own a beautiful house," she used to say. Mark would smile. "Just make sure you can afford it." Thought it was harmless dreaming, until now. The letter. Mark read the letter again, slower this time. A loan. Approved months ago. Payments overdue. His breath grew shallow. "This has to be a mistake," he muttered. He grabbed his glasses, double-checked every line. No mistake. Everything pointed to him, but there was one detail that froze him in place. The contact number listed under the application. It wasn't his, it was Lily's. The confrontation that evening. Mark sat across from Lily in her apartment. She looked nervous before he even spoke. "Lee," he said calmly, placing the letter on the table, "do you want to explain this?" She didn't touch the paper. Instead, she looked away. "Dad, I was going to tell you." Mark's chest tightened. "Tell me what?" She hesitated, then whispered. "I took out a loan in your name." Silence filled the room like a storm cloud. "You what?" Mark's voice cracked, not from anger, but disbelief. "I needed it, Dad. It was the only way." She rushed. "The bank wouldn't approve me. I found a way. Your credit score. It was perfect." "Lily," Mark stood up. "You forged my signature. You used my identity. I was going to pay it back," she insisted. "The house is an investment. It'll double in value." Mark stared at her as if he didn't recognize her. "You risked everything I've worked for without even asking me." Tears filled Lily's eyes, but Mark couldn't tell if they were from guilt or fear. The hidden truth that night. Mark couldn't sleep. He sat in his living room, staring at the old photo of Alina on the wall. "What would you do?" he whispered, but deep down, Mark already knew something important. This wasn't just about money, it was about trust and survival. At 64 years old, Mark couldn't afford to lose everything. If the bank came after him, he could lose his home, his savings, his peace. And one more thing became clear: he needed to act smart, not emotional. Preparation. The next morning, Mark did something Lily never expected. He didn't argue, he didn't shout, he prepared. First he went to the bank, then he spoke to a lawyer, and finally he gathered every document he had: old signatures, financial records, identity proofs. Piece by piece, Mark built a quiet case, because he understood something Lily didn't. Truth needs proof. The investigation. The bank manager sat across from Mark, flipping through documents. "This is serious," the manager said. "If what you're saying is true, this is fraud." Mark nodded. "I never signed this loan." Manager examined the signature. "Does resemble yours, but there are differences." Mark leaned forward. "I want a full investigation." Meanwhile, Lily began to panic. She called him repeatedly. "Dad, please don't take this further," she begged, but Mark didn't answer. Not yet. A father's conflict. Mark wasn't heartless. Every step he took felt like a knife in his own chest. This was his daughter, the little girl who used to hold his hand while crossing the street, the one who cried when she fell off her bicycle, the one he promised to protect, no matter what, and now he was building a case against her. He sat alone one night and whispered, "Where did I go wrong?" But then another thought followed. Or where did she? The breaking point. A week later, Lily showed up at his house unannounced. Her eyes were red. "Please stop this," she said. "If the bank finds out, I could go to jail." Mark looked at her quietly. "And if I don't stop?" he asked. She hesitated. "You won't do that to me." Mark's expression hardened. "You already did something to me, Lily." Silence. "I trusted you," he continued. "You didn't just take money, you took my name, my future." Lily broke down. "I was desperate. Everyone else is moving forward, buying homes, building lives. I felt stuck. And your solution was to destroy mine," Mark replied. The truth revealed. The investigation concluded 2 weeks later. The result was clear. The loan had been obtained using forged authorization. The responsibility shifted. Mark was no longer legally bound to the debt. But the consequences didn't disappear. They simply moved to Lily. The hardest decision. The bank gave Mark a choice. He could press charges or resolve it privately. Mark sat in silence. This was the moment that would define everything. A father, a victim, a man who had lost trust. He called Lily one last time. "Come home," he said. The final conversation. Lily sat across from him again, but this time there was no defense left in her eyes. "I know what you're going to say," she whispered. Mark shook his head. "No, I want you to listen." Leaned forward. "I could press charges. I have every right to." Lily's hands trembled. "I won't," Mark continued. She looked up, shocked. She asked. Mark took a deep breath. "I'm your father, and I still believe you can fix this." Rolled down her cheeks. "That doesn't mean you're free from consequences." Conditions. Mark laid out his terms. Lily would sell the house. Every dollar would go toward repaying the loan. She would sign a legal agreement to repay the remaining amount over time. And most importantly, you will earn back my trust, Mark said. Not with words, with actions. Lily nodded, crying, I will, Dad, I promise. Mark shook his head gently. More promises, just results. The long road back, the months that followed, weren't easy. Lily sold the house at a loss. She took on 2 jobs. She cut every unnecessary expense. And slowly, very slowly, she began to repay what she owed. Mark watched from a distance. He didn't rush to forgive, but he didn't close the door either, because he understood something important. Trust, once broken, doesn't return overnight. It rebuilds piece by piece. A quiet redemption. One evening, nearly a year later, Lily knocked on Mark's door. She looked different, not just tired, but stronger. I made another payment, she said softly. And I wanted to say thank you. Mark nodded. For what? For not giving up on me. Mark looked at her for a long moment. I didn't do it for you, he said. Lily's face fell. I did it because I still believe in who you can become. The moral. Mark, 64 years old, learned that trust is not just given, it must be protected, even from those we love the most. And Lily learned something far more painful. Shortcuts built on deception always lead to consequences. Final reflection. Family doesn't mean blind forgiveness, and love doesn't mean accepting betrayal. Sometimes, the hardest thing a person can do is stand firm, not out of anger but out of truth, because in the end, doing the right thing may hurt, but it saves everything that truly matters.